Welcome to True God Code. Please like, subscribe, and follow the channel for more insights. In this episode, we review Genesis chapters 18 through 22, exploring God's promises, judgment, mercy, faith, covenant, and the sacrifice of Isaac. Genesis chapter 18, verse 1. And the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, as he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. In the stillness of an ordinary afternoon, the sacred interrupts the mundane. This is a theophany, a visible manifestation of God in human likeness. The setting under the oaks of Mamre, a place of covenant, is the fitting stage for what is to come. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door. Abraham's reaction is immediate. He runs. This is more than the duty of hospitality. It is an act of urgent reverence, a recognition that these are no ordinary travelers, and bowed himself toward the ground and said, My Lord, if now I have found favor in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. He insists on serving them, preparing a feast of a tender calf and fresh bread. He stands by them under the tree as they eat, a posture of humble service that precedes the divine promise. And they said unto him, Where is Sarah thy wife? And he said, Behold, in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life, and lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. The question about Sarah reveals their supernatural knowledge. Then comes the promise, so specific it seems impossible. Abraham is 100, Sarah is 90. Scripture tells us it had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, After I am waxed old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? From the privacy of the tent Sarah overhears. Her laughter is not of joy, but of cynical disbelief, born from a lifetime of waiting. It's a human collision with a divine promise. And the Lord said unto Abraham, Wherefore did Sarah laugh? Is anything too hard for the Lord? This question is the chapter's anchor. It rebukes human limitation and establishes divine authority over nature. The promise depends not on their ability, but on the omnipotence of the one who makes it. As the visitors prepare to leave, God reveals his intention to judge Sodom. But first he confides in Abraham, saying, Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? This is the intimacy of the covenant. And Abraham drew near and said, Wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? That be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? This is an astonishing moment. A man stands before his Creator and appeals to God's own character of justice. His boldness is born from his intimate relationship with God, and the Lord said, If I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. What follows is a masterclass in persistent prayer. Abraham respectfully bargains with God, lowering the number from 50 down to 20. He is standing in the gap, a priestly advocate for a people who do not deserve it. And he said, Oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak yet but this once. Perhaps 10 shall be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 10's sake. In this chapter we see 2 profound truths. First, God reaffirms the impossible promise. Isaac, whose name means laughter, will be born, turning Sarah's laugh of doubt into joy. It proves nothing is too hard for the Lord. Second, Abraham steps into his role as a priestly intercessor. In the first recorded prayer of its kind, he prays for mercy upon others. He models a faith that is not passive, but actively engages with God over the fate of the world. Abraham's boldness reveals the intimate relationship God desires. He invites us to draw near, to wrestle with him, and to discover that the judge of all the earth will indeed do right, blending justice with mercy. Genesis 19 opens with 2 angels entering the wicked city of Sodom, where Abraham's nephew Lot had chosen to dwell. And there came 2 angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful unto him. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. Divine judgment is contrasted with mercy. Abraham's prayer was partially answered through Lot's rescue, showing God's faithfulness even in judgment. In Genesis 20 we see Abraham's repeated failure. Once again, he deceives about Sarah being his wife, and Abraham said of Sarah his wife, "She is my sister," and Abimelech king of Gerar sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "Behold, thou art but a dead man for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife." And Abimelech called Abraham and said unto him, "What hast thou done unto us? And what have I offended thee, that thou hast brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin?" Abraham repeats his sin from Egypt, but God protects Sarah and preserves his covenant promise despite human inconsistency. So Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maidservants, and they bare children. The seasons had turned, and the years had passed since the divine messengers promised a son to Abraham and Sarah. Hope had weathered into patient endurance. Yet God's clock ticks not to the rhythm of human expectation, but to the perfect cadence of his sovereign will. True to his unshakable word, the Lord visited Sarah in her old age, fulfilling the promise that had once seemed impossible. And the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. The cry of a newborn echoed through the tents, a sound that silenced decades of doubt and sorrow. And Sarah said, "God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me." The laughter of disbelief in her tent had been transformed into the laughter of pure, unadulterated joy. She who was barren, she who was past the age of childbearing, now held the promise in her arms. It was a miracle for all to see, a testament that nothing is too hard for the Lord. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. The name itself, meaning he laughs, would forever be a reminder of God's faithfulness, and their own initial doubt turned to joy. On the 8th day, in a solemn act of faith and obedience, Abraham fulfilled his side of the covenant. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as God had commanded him. This act physically marked Isaac as the heir of the promise, the next link in the sacred chain through which all nations of the earth would be blessed. The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. The camp was filled with celebration for the long-awaited heir. But amidst the joy a shadow fell. Ishmael, the son of Hagar, himself a young man, looked upon his younger brother not with affection, but with contempt. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. This was not mere childish jealousy. The original language implies a deep-seated derision, a challenge to Isaac's legitimacy and inheritance. Sarah, with a mother's fierce intuition, saw the seed of a bitter rivalry, a conflict between the son of the flesh and the son of the promise. Her protective instincts ignited. She went to her husband with an ultimatum, her words sharp and absolute. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, "Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac." 2 heirs could not coexist in one house. The line of promise had to be kept pure. And the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. This demand tore at Abraham's heart. Ishmael was his flesh and blood, his firstborn. To send him away into the wilderness was an agonizing prospect for any father. He was caught between the love for his son and the divine mandate he knew Isaac represented. In his distress, Abraham turned to God, the only source of wisdom in such an impossible situation. And God's response was both comforting and clarifying. And God said unto Abraham, "Let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad and because of thy bondwoman. In all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken unto her voice, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called." God affirmed Sarah's position not as a matter of maternal preference, but of divine selection. The covenant would flow through Isaac, yet God also showed his compassion for the son being sent away, and also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is thy seed. God promised to care for Ishmael, even outside the covenant of promise. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder and the child, and sent her away. With a heavy heart he obeyed. He entrusted his firstborn son to the wilderness and to the providence of the God who had made promises to them both. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beer-Sheba. The meagre provisions were no match for the unforgiving desert. The sun beat down, the landscape offered no relief, and soon the most precious resource was gone, and the water was spent in the bottle. And she cast the child under one of the shrubs. Ishmael, now limp with dehydration, lay dying. Hagar, unable to watch the final agonizing moments, retreated. And she went and sat her down over against him a good way off, as it were a bowshot. For she said, "Let me not see the death of the child." And she sat over against him, and lift up her voice, and wept. It was the cry of a mother at the absolute end of her strength, her hope extinguished. But in that place of utter desolation, heaven was listening, and God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven, and said unto her, "What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is." God heard the silent prayer, the fading cry of the boy himself. The angel repeated the promise, "Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation." And then a miracle. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the bottle with water, and gave the lad drink. The well had likely been there all along, but her eyes, blinded by despair, could not see it. God did not just provide water, he provided sight. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness, and became an archer. He dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. God fulfilled his promise. Ishmael survived, thrived, and fathered a great nation, blessed with earthly prosperity and strength. This chapter draws a stark and crucial distinction. Isaac's birth represents covenantal fulfillment, the child born not of human strength, but through divine promise and supernatural power. Ishmael, though also blessed and destined to become a great nation, stands apart. The separation of the son of the flesh from the son of the promise is made painfully clear. This is more than a family drama, it is a living parable. The Apostle Paul would later explain in Galatians that these two sons represent two covenants. Ishmael, born of human effort to help God, represents the covenant of law and works. Isaac, born of a miraculous promise, represents the covenant of grace through faith. This separation teaches us that God's ultimate promises are fulfilled not by our striving or natural ability, but by believing him and receiving his supernatural gift. After years of waiting, after decades of holding on to a promise that seemed impossible, Abraham finally had his son Isaac. The laughter and joy that filled his household were a daily reminder of God's faithfulness. The covenant was secure, the lineage established. It is in this period of peaceful fulfillment, after these things, that the narrative takes a sudden heart-stopping turn. The scripture says that God did tempt Abraham. The Hebrew word used here is nasa, which means to test, to prove, or to refine. This was not an enticement to evil, but a profound examination of the heart, a test designed to reveal the depth and quality of Abraham's faith for all generations to witness. Out of the divine silence, a voice calls his name. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am. Abraham's response is immediate, without hesitation. Behold, here I am. In Hebrew, hineni. This is more than a simple acknowledgement of his presence. It is a declaration of total readiness, an offering of his complete attention and availability to God. It's a phrase used by prophets and patriarchs at pivotal moments, signifying their submission to the divine will, whatever it may be. He has no idea what God is about to ask, but he has already placed himself entirely at God's disposal. What follows is arguably the most staggering command in all of Scripture. God's words are deliberate, each phrase compounding the agony. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. While Abraham had another son, Ishmael, Isaac was the unique son of the promise, the one through whom the covenant was to be fulfilled. God acknowledges the deep, pure, fatherly love Abraham has for this child, making the demand not just a test of obedience, but a test of love itself. Would Abraham's love for the giver be greater than his love for the gift? A burnt offering was a sacrifice wholly consumed by fire, a symbol of complete surrender. Abraham is being asked to take the very promise of God, the future of his lineage, and turn it to ash on an altar of his own making. The Scripture's response is as shocking as the command itself. There is no record of Abraham arguing, questioning, or pleading as he had done for Sodom. There is only quiet, resolute action, and Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering. Every action, the saddling of the donkey, the splitting of the wood, is a step of faith into an abyss of uncertainty. He prepares the very fuel for his own son's cremation, and rose up and went unto the place of which God had told him. For 3 days they travelled, 3 days of silence, 3 days for doubt to fester, for grief to overwhelm. Imagine the conversations that didn't happen, the weight of the unspoken truth hanging in the air between father and son. This journey was a crucible, forging his resolve and proving that his obedience was not a fleeting impulse, but a deep, settled conviction. Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. The destination is in sight. The moment of truth is near. It is here that Abraham's faith is given voice. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. Notice his words. We will come again to you. Plural. This is not a lie to placate his servants, it is a profound statement of faith. The book of Hebrews gives us a window into his mind, stating that Abraham reasoned that God was able to raise him up, even from the dead. He believed that even if he went through with the sacrifice, God's promise was so certain that he would resurrect Isaac to fulfill it. His faith was not in a favorable outcome, but in the unfailing character of God. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. The symbolism is almost too profound to bear. The beloved son, walking toward his own sacrifice, carries the very wood on which he is to be offered. Centuries later, another beloved son, Jesus Christ, would carry his own wooden cross up this same mountain range to be sacrificed for the sins of the world. The parallel is unmistakable and intentional. As they walk, the silence is finally broken by the innocent voice of the son. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood. But where is the lamb for a burnt offering? The question is logical, practical, and utterly heartbreaking. It pierces through the silent tension, revealing that Isaac, old enough to carry the wood and understand the mechanics of sacrifice, is still unaware of his designated role. Abraham's response is one of the most pivotal and prophetic statements in the Old Testament. And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. The phrase in Hebrew, Elohim Yireh lo haseh, can be understood in 2 ways. God will provide for himself the lamb, or God will provide himself the lamb. In that moment of immense personal anguish, Abraham speaks a truth far greater than he could have fully understood. These words prove prophetic. God will indeed provide himself as the lamb in the person of Jesus Christ, the ultimate sacrifice. And they came to the place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order. Stone by stone, the place of sacrifice is prepared. Then comes the moment that defies comprehension. And bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. Jewish tradition holds that Isaac was not a small child, but a young man. He was strong enough to resist an elderly father, yet the text records no struggle. Isaac's submission is as profound as Abraham's obedience. He willingly allows himself to be bound, a powerful type of Christ who would later say, No one takes my life from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. And Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. This is the apex of faith. The will of the Father is surrendered. The life of the Son is surrendered. The promise of God is laid upon the altar. In this moment, Abraham's heart is fully revealed. He holds nothing back from God. As the blade is poised to fall, heaven itself intervenes. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham, and he said, Here am I. The double call signifies urgency. The same Hineni response shows Abraham is still fully attentive to God's voice. And he said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. The test is complete. The purpose was not for God to learn something he did not already know, but for Abraham's faith to be demonstrated, proven, and recorded as an everlasting testimony. The fear of God, a reverent awe and unwavering trust, had triumphed over all other loves and fears. With the tension broken, relief floods the mountain top. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. A substitute has been provided. God did not ask for the sacrifice without already having the provision in place, and Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. This is the principle of substitutionary atonement laid bare. An innocent life is given in place of another. In response to this miraculous provision, and Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Yireh. As it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. Jehovah Yireh means the Lord will provide. It became a proverbial saying, a declaration that on the mountain of the Lord, at the point of greatest need, God's provision will be revealed. The divine encounter is not over. The demonstration of faith is met with a declaration of blessing. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time and said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord. Because there was no one greater to swear by, God swears by his own unchanging nature, making this the most absolute and unbreakable oath. His previous promises are now sealed with divine finality, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven and as the sand which is upon the seashore. The promise is not just confirmed, it is magnified. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. The promise narrows from a multitude, seed as descendants, to a single individual, seed as an heir. The Apostle Paul in Galatians 3 identifies this singular seed as Christ himself. Through one descendant of Abraham, all the nations of the earth would find blessing. The story of the offering of Isaac stands as one of the most profound foreshadowings of the gospel. Isaac becomes a clear type of Christ, the Father's uniquely beloved Son who willingly submits to his Father's will, carries the wood for his own sacrifice, and in a figure is received back from the dead on the third day. Abraham's prophetic utterance, God will provide himself a lamb, echoes through the centuries, finding its ultimate fulfillment in the declaration of John the Baptist. Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Abraham's obedience reveals a faith that is total and absolute. It was not a blind leap, but a reasoned trust in the God who had promised and was powerful enough to raise the dead. He was willing to surrender his most precious gift, demonstrating that his ultimate treasure was not the promise, but the promiser. This event on Moriah is more than a historical account. It is a divine portrait of the heart of God the Father, who would on that same mountain range not spare his own beloved Son, but would offer him up for us all. As we look back on Genesis chapters 18 through 22, a divine pattern emerges, a tapestry woven with mercy, promise, and provision. It begins with Abraham's sevenfold intercession for Sodom, where mercy and justice are held in perfect balance. Abraham pleads not just for the righteous, but for the very heart of God's compassion. Then the long-awaited birth of Isaac, Zerah, the promised seed, reminds us that God's grace alone brings life where there was none. On Mount Moriah, Abraham's obedience echoes in the words, Hineni, here I am. In this moment, faith is not just professed, but demonstrated. The near sacrifice of Isaac foreshadows a greater sacrifice to come, revealing God as Jehovah Yireh, the Lord will provide. Through covenant, seed, surrender, and provision, we see the true God code, a divine design written into every verse. This is the true God code, revealing divine design, one verse at a time. Like, subscribe, and join us for the next revelation. In these chapters, we saw God's covenant confirmed, his mercy extended, and his promises fulfilled even through testing. Abraham's journey reminds us that faith is proven by obedience, and God's promises are always fulfilled in his perfect timing. If this message moved you, please like and subscribe to True God Code. In the next episode, we'll witness Isaac's legacy continue through covenant and marriage. Until then, may you walk in faith as Abraham did.